Thank you so much for being here for our first episode. Please excuse any imperfections as we master the art of podcasting.
Hello, and welcome to the Digestible Podcast. I am Stacy.
And I'm Melissa.
Here at Digestible, we give you the information you want in the perfect amount of time for your busy life. And we make sure the information is easily digestible. Get it?
Stacy and I both love to read the latest research and books by the experts. We attend conferences and meet those experts, and we love to talk about health and nutrition all day long.
But we realize that not everybody else does. And we were finding that in our professional life and in our personal life, people really just wanted us to tell them what to do with a little bit about the why. So we figured, why can't we just bring that to everybody all in one place?
So today we are excited to bring you our conversation with Mary Purdy. Mary is an MSRDN, and she's an integrative eco-dietitian working at the intersection of sustainable food systems, climate, and human health. She spent over 13 years in clinical practice using personalized and food as medicine approach and taught for 8 years at the university level. She is now the managing director of the Nutrient Density Alliance, which works to connect the dots between soil health and nutrient-rich food. She has served as a nutrition and sustainability advisor for numerous food brands and organizations. With 125 plus podcast episodes and 2 books, she is a leading voice in nutrition and sustainability, fostering resilient, just, and healthy food systems.
Understanding why our food is not as nutritious as it once was and what we can do about it is amazing. I don't think everyone is really aware that the broccoli that our grandparents were eating is not the same as the broccoli we're eating today. And I love broccoli, and I would eat broccoli pretty much every meal, but I don't want to have to eat 10 times as much broccoli as I need to get the same amount of nutrients that I should be able to get out of one serving.
Exactly.
So let's listen to Mary and hear her words of wisdom.
Hi, Mary. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm so thrilled you're here with us. Your experience is vast. You have a lot to bring to our audience and our listeners, and we're really excited to dive in so that they feel informed and they have some good action items when they leave here today about how to approach our food systems today. So thanks for being here.
I love a good action item. So yeah, absolutely.
We're really excited to talk to you. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What is the Nutrient Density Alliance and what do they do?
Okay, so I am the managing director of the Nutrient Density Alliance, and we are essentially a collaborative network. And we have folks in our network who are working in the food industry, in the agricultural sector, and we have people who are in the nutrition, health, and the food as medicine space. And we are essentially making the case for the fact that regenerative agriculture has nutritional advantages. And that's in order to help improve and increase the market for regenerative agriculture and foods produced in that way. And we are like a hub for networking, for education, for putting together data and research so that people can come and find it, and to help brands, businesses, and organizations create effective communication strategies for connecting the dots between soil health and human health.
Okay, so let's start off with a basic one that I think most people are either starting to become aware of or really don't have a lot of awareness about. But tell us about the nutrition in our food today versus what the nutrition was in our food like 75 years ago, because it has changed and people either don't know or they're just starting to kind of get it.
Absolutely. And I think there's a few things happening on this front. I think what they might know already is that there is a huge amount of ultra processed foods. When we go to the grocery store, you look down the aisle and most food, 60% of the calories that we consume actually come from ultra processed foods, which tend to be fairly low in nutritional value and fairly high in the kinds of ingredients that don't always support our health. So that's number one. Number two is the climate crisis. The changes in temperature have actually affected the nutritional quality of food. So fewer nutrients in the foods as a result of the weather patterns that we're seeing. But what I think you're asking about, and this is that nutrient density piece or nutrient richness piece, is that food is actually less nutritious than it was 50, 60, 75 years ago. And of course, that depends on the crop or the plant or the food. But in general, food has gone down in nutritional value by 25 to 50%. So things like, less iron, less magnesium, less riboflavin, less calcium, and fewer amounts or less amounts of these really important compounds that we find in plants. These are called phytochemicals or plant chemicals. Some people might know them more easily as like antioxidants. Like blueberries have antioxidants in them, like green tea, antioxidants. So food that is produced today and grown today tends to have less of that as well. So fewer of those really important compounds. And we might ask why, right? Like, well, how has that happened? And this is data from the USDA, right? They've been measuring the amount of these nutrients in foods for decades. But the last measurement they took, in 1950 is very different from the measurement that they took in 1999 or 2017. And the reason is because we had this green revolution, which sounds like a good thing, like green revolution, like that sounds great. And the goal with that was to actually increase the yield of food because people were starving and we needed to have more food. So they were like, well, let's add more fertilizers. Let's make the agricultural practices really effective and efficient. So we added in all kinds of chemicals to the ground and the crops, to prevent pests from coming in and prevent weeds from taking things over. But actually what that wound up doing was totally depleting the soil, right? And if you don't know, food grows in soil. Sometimes we think it grows in a little plastic baggie that we grab from our grocery store, but no, it actually starts off in the ground. And the ground, the soil, is where that food gets its nutrition. And all of the little bugs and these little teeny tiny little microorganisms are actually a part of that. The soil should be teeming with all kinds of life. And that life in the soil helps the plants to be more nutritional and more nutritious and more nutrient rich. But when that soil is depleted because of all those chemicals, that process just doesn't happen. So the plant doesn't actually grab the nutrients from the soil, and the microorganisms, which may have died off because of all the chemicals, aren't there to help bring those nutrients from the soil to the plant. So that makes a huge difference in the nutritional quality of the food. And then we might ask, well, why is that important? Well, if you don't know, your health, our health, the functioning of every single physiological system in our body relies on nutrients. So if we ain't got those nutrients in our body is not functioning as well as it could be. So that's the short end.
Saying is the fruit and vegetables that our parents and grandparents grew up eating might look the same or might not as what we eat today, but the nutritional value is very different.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is having an impact on our health. And as a result, when we don't get the nutrition from food that we require, what do we feel? We feel hungry, right? Because our body is like, I need this much vitamin C, this much riboflavin, this much thiamine, this much vitamin B, such and such. When we don't get those, we're like, gosh, I feel hungry. So people are consuming a whole bunch of calories and a lot of food, but they wind up feeling unsatiated, which we're calling hidden hunger, which can have implications as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I saw an image, a couple of instances, and actually one of them, Mary, was for the last meeting at the Nutrient Density Alliance membership, was you had a farmer who decided to farm regeneratively, and he realized that and he was doing citrus as one of his crops. And he said that the nutritional content of one of his oranges, the one that was grown regeneratively after just 3 years growing that way, had as many nutrients as 6 conventional oranges. And you see this image of 1 versus 6. And it's like, I should be able to get the nutrients I need from 1 orange. I would need to eat 6 to get the same amount. And we can't eat 6 oranges. We might try, but our stomachs won't, our bodies don't allow it. So we have to eat more calories to get more nutrition. And so that's part of the problem with our food system these days, in addition to the ultra processing, is that, like you said, our bodies are still craving because we're not getting those nutrients. So that's amazing.
100%, right. Yeah.
So let's, if we could, Mary, could we transition over to like, now we have this knowledge. Our listeners have this information. I'm in the grocery store. And I see, since I started with oranges, let's just say an orange, right? And I pick up an orange, and the orange doesn't say anything other than maybe like the company that distributed it and the little number that tells you, how it's coded. But then you pick up another orange and it says it's organic. It has the organic sign on it, the symbol.
Yes.
What would I be getting different in the organic? We'll get to regenerative, but let's start with organic versus conventional.
Okay. So, I mean, organic, there is an actual certification and a standard that anybody who is farming organically, who has that little patch on their orange or whatever they're producing, it says USDA organic. That has been a very specific set of guidelines that that organization or brand has to follow. So they can't use synthetic fertilizers or industrial pesticides. If it's an animal product that has to be organically fed or produced, there's no animal byproducts that are allowed to be in the feed, or antibiotics or growth hormones. And then GMOs, or genetically modified organisms, are also prohibited. So if something is organic, none of those things, supposedly, if they're following those very strict and rigid guidelines, none of those things should be a part of how that food was produced. And why is that important? Because, when foods are produced with pesticides, number one, that actually reduces the number of those antioxidant-rich compounds that I was talking about earlier that the plant produces in response to pests and adverse weather conditions and predators and things like that. So those levels will go down, but so will the overall nutritional value because of the fertilizers, again, that are kind of taking the place of the natural process that happens in the soil. And we know that there's potentially some synthetic pesticide residues that are on those foods as well. And we have seen gobs of research to show that when we are either exposed to pesticides directly, and pesticides, I should say, includes fungicides, insecticides, and herbicides. When we are exposed to those directly, that can have huge health implications. But even residues from those chemicals can have implications for our health.
Okay, so
Cleaned off.
Not
people
very.
talk about how you're supposed to clean your produce.
Yeah, it really cannot be cleaned off, unfortunately.
Because it's in there.
It is in the heart of the actual plant. Not that plants have hearts, although maybe they do, but it's in the body, the cellular structure of the plant. Now, plants that have thicker peels, like actually a banana or an avocado, the chemical is less likely to become a part of the fruit, right? But remember, we're not just thinking about us, the eaters, we're thinking about the growers and the farmers and the communities who live nearby, and the impact that those pesticide chemicals may have on them as well.
Okay, so I'm hearing three things. Number one, the chemical residue from the pesticides can impact, from what I understand, our microbiome, which can then impact our hormone levels. Studies are showing that. So the chemicals get to us. Number two, the soil should full of life, so it can't pull the nutrients as efficiently, and we're not going to get as nutrient-dense food. So the organic is more likely to be a more nutrient-dense food. And the third thing is when you get rid of all of their competition and all the things that make life hard, they can't build up their natural resistances. Those resistances that they build up, their immunity turn into those polyphenols, those antioxidants that actually help us. So those things are also impacted. Is that correct?
Yes, all of the above. And again, when we don't have those compounds in the food that we're consuming, we're creating an insufficiency in our own bodies that can have huge health implications in all the different systems, from brain to heart to liver to immunity to inflammation. It's all connected.
Right, exactly. Okay, so let's take that a step further, because that step gets us to nirvana. Because I've heard you explain this to audiences before, and so well, Mary. So I'm happy to ask you this here, and you've touched on this already, but let's reiterate this maybe succinctly, which is, what's the difference between now organic and regenerative, or better yet, I know this isn't a short answer, but it's a beautiful one, and I know you make it digestible for our listeners. Why regenerative? Why should we be seeking regenerative food in our grocery stores from our farmers?
So we just talked about organic as being no synthetic fertilizer, no synthetic pesticides. Organic, which was, originally foundational to helping make the soil healthy, is very much about like what is not in the food, which has benefits to our health, right? And that is great. However, some organic agriculture has been co-opted by really large agribusinesses. So they may be growing organically, but it's a monoculture. So they're growing just one thing, which doesn't necessarily help the soil to be that healthy, living, breathing ecosystem. Regenerative agriculture, while it doesn't have like a federally recognized definition, although they just came out with one in California, what it is that it's a way of practicing agriculture that is rooted in a set of principles that ultimately is helping to manage soil in a way that gets it to be as healthy as possible and helps to create a healthy ecosystem surrounding it. And that is all about how we treat the soil. So not disturbing it, keeping it covered. You might have heard the term cover crops, crop rotation, or diversifying crops. You aren't just planting one thing. You're planting carrots with rutabaga because the predators or the pests that might attack the carrot plant are actually predators for the pests that attack the rutabaga plant. So there's actually a wonderful symbiotic relationship that takes place, which means you don't have to use these synthetic chemicals to protect against these insects and weeds. So that's the other piece of regenerative agriculture: no synthetic chemicals. And there is often an incorporation of animals that are acting as a natural fertilizer. So the animals take a nice big poop on the land, and that is acting as a natural nitrogen source. And what do we do in return? We feed those animals sometimes some cover crops so that they get nourished as well. And again, it's like this wonderful cyclical process that has benefits for the land, the soil, the animals, and the surrounding communities. And it's really based in what we think of as like indigenous practices, people who have been stewarding the land for thousands of years. And one thing that I think is not often mentioned as a result of these practices that are very, very critical to helping the soil be more, I guess, to be more rich with nutrients, but also when soil is healthy, it can sequester or grab the carbon from the atmosphere, which is contributing to our climate crisis, and hold it down. So the carbon gets captured into the soil, and that has huge benefits for the climate crisis that we're working with. And as I mentioned earlier, when the soil is healthy, it's more nutritious, that the
Yes.
food it grows in it. So that's a
Beautiful.
big piece.
The organization Kiss the Ground has a really wonderful YouTube video that sort of gives you like like an animation of showing you how the carbon cycles and how soil can become a carbon sink if it's farmed that way. So that's I thank you for that. That's really great. And I know Stacy's got the next question, but I just wanted to add in. There's this. I was listening to a podcast and I heard a farmer. He owns Kings Grove. It's a blueberry farm in Florida. And he was talking about, he's a big proponent of the real organic certification, which is like a step up from the USDA organic. It's not quite regenerative, but he definitely farms regeneratively. And he was talking about how there's all these bugs and birds and things on his farm, and he does diversity and, biodiversity and all these things. And then, so I decided to order some of his blueberries. They bought this facility to flash cool them right on site. And I ordered a box one year, and it was not inexpensive. It was definitely a treat. They were so delicious. Stacey, I gave those to you last year for Mother's Day. Do you remember?
You did. They were
So
delicious.
I gave them to my mom, my sisters. I'm like, you're going to love these blueberries. But it's not just that they taste better. And by the way, more polyphenols, more antioxidants, more of those chemicals, the natural chemicals that the plants use to defend themselves, make them taste better. So the blueberries were not only delicious, but I just knew every time I put one in my mouth, I was just giving my body like this incredible powerhouse food.
It's such a selling point too. When food tastes good, people are a lot more likely to eat it. I mean, the last time I had a bag of baby carrots, it was completely lifeless in terms of the experience that I had on my tongue. Nothing. It tasted like I was just chewing on sticks, right? And then when I went to the farmer's market and had an organic or regeneratively grown carrot, an explosion of flavor. And so, there's such a huge connection there.
Amazing.
So it sounds like regenerative is the gold standard, obviously, not only for our own health, but for the farmer's health, for the soil, for the environment, for everything. Why is it so hard to find regenerative grown produce? Like if I go to my grocery store, I don't really see the label regenerative on the produce. I see organic, I see conventional.
And it's possible that there is produce in your grocery store or wherever you shop that is regenerative, but there just is no label that says that. There are these standards that have been put into an organic, or rather a regenerative organic certification called ROC. So they do exist, but they're mostly on, more packaged products, which is fine and that's great. But yes, why don't we see regenerative produce rather, in the stores? I think number one is because people don't really know what it even is, right? When I had a conversation with my mother-in-law recently and I was telling her about regenerative agriculture, this is someone who has known me for years and has known the work that I've done for the past 5 years. She still didn't really understand what it was. So I think people are confused. They think it's about regenerating like an extra arm or a leg. And so I think that confusion doesn't really lead to a demand for it. So there isn't that demand because consumers are not demanding it, right? I think there's also not a great understanding from folks who are in the food industry, in the retail industry, and people who are in like the public health space who could say, yes, it's really important that we grow our food in a way that supports the soil health because that helps to make people healthier as well when they have more nutrition. There isn't that kind of knowledge or baseline so that those people can't be saying, hey, let's make sure that we're sourcing from a regenerative farm and that we talk about it in our at our store, that we do a big campaign about it. And then the other thing is that it's expensive, right? So farmers, if they're growing food conventionally and they want to grow more in a regenerative way, I mean, the organic certification is expensive, but regenerative practices are also, initially there feels like there's an expense. There's not a sense of like surety that you're going to get a market that people are going to be willing to pay for it if it costs a little bit more. So there's a whole host of factors, and it really is about, how do we create systemic change as opposed to just one person saying, hey, do you have anything regeneratively produced here at the store? It's a much bigger shift that needs to be made.
Well, speaking of that, because, and I've heard you mention this on other interviews that you've done, the consumer lever is powerful. So if more people did understand what's missing from their food, what they want in their food, can you help our listeners understand the power that they have as consumers to impact that market so they can see those types of food items in their grocery store?
Yes, they have power. We have power. You have power. We just need to use that power, right? And that power is in our purchases with our dollars. If we have those dollars, if we have access to those places where those dollars can be spent, and the power is also in our voices, right? So number one, if you have access to places that are growing foods that are regenerative, buy those foods, right? Actually put the money towards the purchase that is supporting the farmer so that the farmer has more opportunity to grow those foods more often for more people. Number two is like when we go out to the store, to a restaurant, we can say, hey, where did this food come from? Or, hey, are you working with any local farmers at this restaurant? Or, hey, would you be willing to talk to a farmer who I met the other day and is sourced, from his or her farm? The other thing is like, we need to get to know our farmers, right? I mean, that's the other disconnect that's happening here. We don't even know where food comes from. We don't often have a sense of the process that it takes to bring that beautiful blueberry from the seed in the soil to your plate for that delicious blueberry smoothie that you might make. And there are community gardens, there are urban farms that are doing this work. So we need to know about them, seek those out, share them with people, get there, support them, ask for more, demand that there's a community garden in every school. And you can advocate for policies as well. There are lots of policies, both on the local, the regional, the federal level, that are working to help farmers transition. A lot of that money has been taken away recently this year, but we can continue to call our representatives and make a big stink about it. And then lastly, everybody out there, all of you, all of us have some sphere of influence, right? So if you're a parent at a school, you can demand to that school or ask kindly or in the most friendly possible way, hey, what you are serving at the school, I think would be more preferable to be sourced locally or sourced from local farms. Like you can speak up as a parent, you're paying to be at that school, right? Or your kids have rights to have healthy food. If you have a parent in a long-term healthcare facility, you can find out, well, where are you sourcing the food from that's at the cafeteria or at the local food service facility that's at that space. there's so many ways that we can make a difference. It just is about beginning to speak up and to take notice and to make a difference where you're able to do that.
I have a random question that's a
Yeah.
little off topic, but not really. So I do find at the grocery store there are products that have been hydroponically grown
Mm-hmm.
and also greenhouse grown.
Mm-hmm.
And what does the research say on those items and their nutrient value?
Good question.
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and I want to make sure that I don't minimize the importance of foods that are being grown in hydroponic systems, because ultimately it helps bring more lettuce to the table or more sprouts to the table or whatever else is being grown in those hydroponic systems. However, when we think of hydroponics, what's missing?
Soil.
Yeah.
Soil.
No soil.
No soil in hydroponics.
Right.
And,
Right.
bless it, because it's giving us more salad. But again, if we're thinking about the connection between soil health and the nutrient value of the food and how that makes somebody more healthy because of the nutritional status that they gain, we don't see that. So you're not going to have that process that takes place in a hydroponic system of that immune defense system of the plant going, there's a predator. Eek, there's some crazy weather. There's a pest. Let me squirt out those phytochemicals or those polyphenols that you were mentioning that are acting as its immune defense system and then give us those benefits health-wise. So we just don't see that in as high amounts. So it's kind of like it helps to provide more food, but it doesn't solve necessarily the issue of that improved nutrition that we see with better soil.
So hydroponic would be comparable to just conventionally grown
But without the chemicals.
without the chemicals.
Without the
Yeah.
chemicals.
So at least
But
you're not
nutrient-wise.
burdening your body with the toxicity of those chemicals,
Yeah.
but you're also not getting the nutrients density that you would be, the nutrient
What about
density.
greenhouse grown? Because those are just grown inside, but once again, it's probably no
There's
pest.
usually soil, though, that's involved. So as long as that soil has been, there's compost added to that soil, or there's other healthy amendments that are brought to that soil is rich with nutrition, and there should be microorganisms living in that soil, or earthworms hanging out in that soil. So that can still be a part of that soil system.
And there are sometimes pests that get into the greenhouse. They might build a little bit of that defense system, even if they're not weathering like wind and rain and all of the things that they would be maybe exposed. But I've worked in a greenhouse and they do have pest issues. So
Yes, for sure.
yeah.
I mean, we need all of the above, right? Like at this point, I'm not gonna downplay the role that hydroponics and greenhouses can have on making sure that we just get more fruits and vegetables and produce into our body. So let's keep it all in. Let's just make it better where we can.
Great. Yeah, that's great. Good question, Stacy.
Okay. So, Mary, if you could give our listeners one assignment today, something they can do or implement right away as it relates to food and their health, what would it be?
That's a tough question, because I feel like so many people are in different places in their lives, and I am a big fan of meeting people where they're at. So if I give one assignment, someone might be like, I could never do that. And someone might be like, I did that like 5 years ago. Okay, Mary? So I would say, for those folks who are like completely, so it feels like a blank slate to them, I feel like just taking notice and starting to have conversations and listen to podcasts like this, or maybe tune into some of the websites out there that are talking about this. I love the Food Print is a great website that has all kinds of very accessible articles. Same thing with Civil Eats, just gives you a sense of like what's happening in our food system. Where does our food come from? Like just start thinking about where the heck your food comes from. You look at this food in front of you and you're like, okay, I'm having this bowl of soup. Where did that tomato come from? Where did those beans come from? Where did this broth come from? Right? Just getting curious about it. But if you already know that stuff, if you're like, I know where my food comes from, now what do I do? I would say one of the best things that people can do, diversify. Diversify your diet. If you have been eating one type of fruit or vegetable, you're always like carrots and spinach, apples and bananas, like just start branching out and diversify the diet, because that will afford you more a broader spectrum of nutrients. And also, as we diversify the diet, we're creating a greater demand for those foods, and we're losing a lot of foods these days. So diversify.
Okay, so at Digestible, we like to say, don't panic, just pivot. Would you be willing to share with us a small change that you've made in your life that has made a big difference?
Yes. And this is a change that is free and available to anyone and everyone. and I'll show you the change that I have made, which is this, and that is breathing deeply. I'm someone who struggles with sleep, and also struggles with being a little bit overwhelmed with life, whether that's because of external influences, of all the crazy things that are happening in the world, or things that are happening in my own life, and feeling so passionate about doing so many things. And sometimes I just need to stop and take some breaths. And it's a miracle. Like, I can't believe it's so simple and it freaking works every time to calm my mind and body down. 10 deep breaths can be a game changer at any time of day or night.
100% agree. That's great advice.
That is great advice. Thank you for that. I think we all need to take a pause every once in a while and give ourselves a few deep breaths. It helps. That's wonderful.
Yeah. I started doing breath work, like planned daily breath work this
Oh,
year. It's been
nice.
on my to-do list for forever to incorporate it daily, and now I do.
Nice.
It makes such a difference.
Yeah, you can
Wonderful.
feel like the tension just drop, and then you're just a better person for 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 everybody, including
For everybody,
yourself.
sure. Yeah, 100%. What you feel inside comes out, and the people in your lives that are impacted by it. So it really does help to know how to get yourself to a good place. That's great. Thank you. I appreciate
Sure.
that, Mary. Thanks
So
for being
simple.
here today. This has been wonderful.
Thank
You
you.
have been an exceptional guest. We are so excited to share this with our listeners.
Great.
This is great.
Well, you've both been great hosts. Thanks for encapsulating and really guiding the conversation in a way that creates practical strategies for your listeners. I think that's what we all need.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on your food, health, and nutrition journey at the Digestible Podcast. Stacy and I are so glad you were with us today. If you want to know more about the important work that Mary Purdy is doing at the Nutrient Density Alliance for farmers, food companies, and for eaters like us, visit them at nutrientdensityalliance.org. The biggest compliment you can give us at Digestible is sharing this episode with others. So please subscribe, like, follow, and share. Your feedback and your interests are meaningful. So please reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. And remember, don't panic, just pivot. The content shared on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We are not medical professionals, and the views expressed here are not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any health conditions. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making any health-related decisions.